Okay, thanks everyone. So it's a pleasure to join you. I know Anissa has been joining at points, though not I see at the moment. As you said, I'm responsible for currently Asia Pacific in terms of the grant performance that the implementation of the grants and the relationships that we manage with the 16 countries in Asia, and actually also temporarily for the 17 countries in Anglophone Africa. So very much on the sort of grant management side of the house, rather than a particular technical angle. But I'm also involved in some of the thinking that Gavi is doing around innovation. And this is one of the areas in which Gavi, the Secretariat, is trying to rethink its approach as we enter the next strategy period from 2021 to 2025. So this slide, there's only, I think, 6 or so slides today. This first one describes some of that context. So as you will know, Gavi's tried to kind of associate itself with innovation, both in terms of the design of Gavi per se, but also in some of the ways in which we operate. And we very much see this as being all the more important as we move to a particular focus around zero-dose children moving forwards. We're also conscious, of course, of the COVID-19 situation and trying to also think about how those innovations that we've already started to kind of pilot or scale up, or at least to identify, could also be used specifically for the process of maintaining, restoring, and strengthening routine immunization in the context of COVID. And it's the latter then, which I'm going to talk primarily about. Although we know that a lot of the innovations that we're currently describing as being relevant to kind of COVID are also usable in a longer term setting, which is of course, in fact, the setting in which they originally were identified by Gavi. So what we've done then, so we've collated innovations together into a catalogue. The idea being that it represents a kind of single point of reference, which facilitates countries looking at the innovations that we've identified, facilitates the process of Gavi's senior country managers raising and using it for discussion with countries. So it is meant, as it says here, as a discussion starter point. It's not comprehensive information, but it is intended to provide sufficient entry point information to allow for further investigation, dialogue, follow-up, etc. And some of the examples given here around, what are the particular needs that this particular innovation is aiming to address, some of the metrics that we've been able to pull out around effectiveness and cost and timelines, for example. So I'm not sure to what extent you have, how closely you've been involved with Gavi's work on kind of private sector innovations in particular to date, but we have occasionally fallen into the trap of being a little bit too kind of selling them and perhaps not always taking enough care to highlight some of the costs or the prerequisites or the constraints around innovations. And what I think I'm emphasizing in this particular slide here is that we're trying to move a little bit further away from that. So we're trying to be more agnostic in terms of the innovations that we present. So whilst we have referred to some particular providers, we do that in the context of setting out a broader approach, a broader kind of category of innovations that could be used, using particular providers as illustrations of that, but trying to emphasize that there are usually others out there who could do the same. And again, trying to use that as a way of starting the process of thinking about those. The one I'll show you briefly now is a reference. It's version 1, so it's going to evolve further. We haven't always got the kind of the metrics exactly right, or some of the wording right. So we're intending to very much keep it as a live thing. We're also very conscious that a catalogue in itself, whilst it's a step forward because it collates innovations, which is more than Gavi's done before, it's still our perspective on those from the global level, it still doesn't necessarily in itself allow an automatic way to align country knowledge, country needs, country interests with some of the global ones. So we're conscious that it's not sufficient yet to represent a sort of true marketplace or other means to align needs with the opportunities that we perceive at the global level. And we hope it's a step towards that. And that sort of better kind of bringing together of global level knowledge and local knowledge, and of power dynamics, for example, and of participation is something that we want to move much further towards in the Gavi strategy period, which starts soon. This is just one step towards that. So I referred to categories of innovations, and this slide shows those as we've distributed them. And I had a conversation with Anissa in preparation for this, and I mean, for example, section D, which talks about reaching missed communities and under-immunized children. So in the case of HPV, vaccine instructions that are not in a school setting, for out-of-school children, for example, potentially there's innovations there that would be an example that could be usable in this context. And then similarly, of course, on E around the kind of demand generation, but also addressing of misconceptions or anti-vax rumors that we also identify. This could be a particularly useful section in the HPV context. But again, there are others in those other categories that you can see there. And the 21 innovations that are included in this first kind of nominally COVID-specific version of the catalogue are distributed across all of those 6 categories. This then is an example of how it looks. So, in the first page, which here is the one on the left, it refers to the category, the principle of it, there being a dashboard to consolidate data. Talks about that first page, talks then about the, what might that broad concept of an interactive dashboard look like, before then introducing as an example Zenesis, which is one of the innovations, private sector partners we've identified at the global level, and then going into, with the subsequent 2 pages, more information about that particular provider and talking about some of the, as you can see on the final page, for example, feasibility requirements, some of the extent to which efficacy is proven or not, and indicative costs. So this format here is a consistent format across all of the 21 different types of innovations that are included in the catalogue. And as I say, intended very much to be a starting point for further conversation. So that's the final slide, but let me just briefly comment then. So what's happening at the moment is that the Gavi Secretariat senior country managers, who are those in the Secretariat responsible for the relations with in-country stakeholders, are in the process of holding sort of annual review meetings with each country. And as they do so, and this year they're focused very much on the maintaining, restoring and strengthening immunization post-COVID, are bringing this sort of thinking and specifically the catalogue to those conversations. I think we're probably about 1/3 of the way through those dialogues this year. And so this is that kind of, we're right in the middle of that phase of exposing a broader group of in-country stakeholders to this. And we'll see where that gets to in terms of any interest that we then would manage and handle in greater detail back at the Secretariat. Any subsequent versions of the catalogue, I suspect we'll start to think about in the next couple of months. And we're very conscious too that this has been developed on the basis of Secretariat information, and not really at all at this stage broader alliance, or even broader set of partners around the sector. So what we're trying to do also is to move to the point whereby it's less Secretariat specific, and Secretariat specific knowledge of innovations does tend to be private sector specific too. So we're trying to broaden off both of those perspectives as we move further forwards, in the hope this becomes a broader repository of information and that can be usable for the community. moving forward. That's that. Thank you. Happy to stay around for the question and answer around this broad sector. Thanks.